I was
The
still at
merger
my
details
desk
just
long
came
after
through. We need
everyone
to
else
act
had
now.
left. The
What's the
office
timeline?
lights dimmed to that
We
cold,
close by midnight.
after-hours
Let's
glow
move.
that makes every thought feel heavier than it should. My phone buzzed once on the desk, face down. I didn't check it right away. Working late had become normal ever since I started reporting directly to her, the CEO. Brilliant. Demanding. Untouchable. The kind of woman people whispered about in elevators and went silent about when she walked in. When I finally flipped the phone over, my breath stopped. Her name was on the screen. Not an email. Not a Slack message. A photo. For half a second, I thought it was a mistake, then I opened it. It wasn't explicit, but it was intimate in a way that hit harder than anything graphic ever could. A mirror shot, confident, deliberate, with a caption beneath it that made my pulse spike, "See what you could have had." My mind raced. This wasn't meant for me. Or maybe it was. The power imbalance, the months of tension, the late-night meetings that felt too personal, the looks held a second too long, it all rushed back at once. I stared at the screen, knowing that whatever I did next could change everything. I could ignore it. Pretend it never happened. Or I could reply. And I did. Not flirtatious. Not crude. Just honest. I wrote that I respected her, that this crossed a line, that I'd worked too hard to be reduced to a what-if. I hit send before fear could stop me. The typing bubble appeared, disappeared. Then nothing. The next morning, HR was waiting for me. No explanation. No discussion. Just a folder, a rehearsed tone, and a sentence that rang in my ears like a verdict: "Your position has been terminated effective immediately." As I walked out with my box of belongings, phone buzzing with unanswered questions, I realized something terrifying and empowering at the same time. Telling the truth had cost me my job, but staying silent would have cost me myself. If this story already has you hooked, don't forget to subscribe, because this is only the beginning, and what happened after I was fired changed everything. Losing the job hurt, but the silence afterward hurt more. No reference. No explanation to colleagues who suddenly stopped texting back. For weeks, I replayed that moment over and over, wondering if I should have handled it differently. Then, late one night, an email came through, from her. Not corporate. Personal. She admitted it hadn't been an accident. She said power had blurred her judgment, that she'd expected compliance, not resistance. My reply, she wrote, had shaken her. It forced her to see herself the way others might one day see her if the truth came out. I didn't respond. Instead, I focused on rebuilding, freelance work, interviews, telling my story carefully, honestly. Months later, the company made headlines. An internal investigation. Quiet resignations. Policies rewritten. Her name gone from the website. I never celebrated her fall, but I did feel something settle inside me, a sense that integrity has a long echo, even when it costs you in the moment. The last time we spoke, she thanked me. Said my reply was the first time anyone had ever said no to her. I told her I hoped it wouldn't be the last. Today, I'm in a better place, not because I played the game, but because I refused to. And if there's one reason I'm sharing this story, it's this: sometimes the bravest reply is the one that burns the bridge behind you, and lights the path ahead. If this story moved you, challenged you, or made you think twice, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Stories like this don't end here, and the next one might hit even closer to home. Being fired didn't just take away my job, it stripped me of my identity. For years, I'd introduced myself by my role, my company, my proximity to power. Now all of that was gone, replaced by awkward explanations and forced smiles in interviews that went nowhere. Every time someone asked why I left my last position, I felt my throat tighten. I learned quickly that truth makes people uncomfortable. Some recruiters went quiet the moment I hinted at ethical conflict. Others smiled politely and never called back. But the story didn't stay buried. A former colleague reached out anonymously, telling me the company was panicking behind closed doors. Apparently, my firing hadn't silenced anything, it had started a chain reaction. Screenshots existed. Not just the photo, but internal messages afterward. People were talking. HR was scrambling. For the first time since that night, I felt something other than shame. I felt vindication. One evening, as I sat alone scrolling through rejection emails, my phone buzzed again. A notification from a journalist. They'd heard there was more to the CEO's sudden absence from public events. They asked if I'd be willing to talk, off the record. I stared at the message for a long time. This was the moment that could either finish destroying me or finally let me breathe. I agreed, on one condition: no sensationalism, no twisting the truth. Just facts. When the article eventually dropped weeks later, it didn't name me, but everyone inside the industry knew. The narrative shifted. I wasn't the disgruntled employee anymore. I was the one who said no. If this part of the story is hitting hard, make sure you subscribe, because what happens next proves that silence is never as safe as they make it seem. The fallout was quiet but devastating. Board members resigned. Policies were rewritten overnight. The company issued a statement about values and accountability, the same words they'd ignored when it mattered. I watched it all from a distance, no longer angry, just observant. Healing didn't come all at once, it came in small moments. A job offer from a smaller firm that valued transparency. A message from a junior employee thanking me for speaking up, saying it gave them courage to set boundaries. Even an apology, public, carefully worded, but real, from the woman who once held my future in her hands. She admitted that power had insulated her from consequences, and that my reply had shattered that illusion. I never responded. Closure doesn't always require conversation. Sometimes it's enough to know you didn't betray yourself. Today, when I look back at that message, see what you could have had, I realize how wrong it was. What I could have had wasn't worth what I would have lost. And if sharing this story reminds even one person that dignity matters more than approval, then it was all worth it. If you're still here, still listening, hit subscribe. Stories like this don't always get told, but when they do, they deserve to be heard. And the next one might just change the way you see power forever. Time has a way of reshaping pain into purpose. Months after everything collapsed, I stopped waking up angry and started waking up clear. The new job didn't have the prestige or the skyline office, but it had something my old life never gave me: peace. People listened when I spoke. Boundaries were respected. And slowly, without realizing it, I stopped flinching every time my phone buzzed. Then something unexpected happened. Invitations started coming in. Panels. Private conversations. Quiet coffee meetings with people who wanted advice but didn't want attention. They'd heard about the situation. Not the gossip version, the real one. The version where someone chose self-respect over silence. I realized my story had traveled further than I ever could have on my own. One night, while preparing notes for a small talk I'd been asked to give, I reread the message that started it all. It didn't hurt anymore. It felt distant, like a chapter from someone else's life. That's when I understood the real cost of that reply wasn't my job, it was my fear. And losing that fear gave me something far more valuable. If you're watching this and wondering whether speaking up is worth the risk, stay with me, and don't forget to subscribe, because the final chapter shows what happens when truth outlives power. I never planned to be known for one moment, but I accepted that some moments define us whether we want them to or not. Years from now, my resume will change, my titles will evolve, but that reply will always exist as proof of who I was when it mattered. I don't tell this story to paint myself as a hero. I tell it because too many people think survival means compliance. It doesn't. Sometimes survival looks like walking out with a cardboard box, unsure of tomorrow, but certain of yourself. The last time I checked, the company that fired me still exists, but it's quieter now, more careful, more afraid of the truth than it ever was of losing me. As for her, I hope she learned that authority doesn't grant entitlement, and influence doesn't erase accountability. And if you've stayed until the end of this story, that tells me something about you. You value honesty, even when it's uncomfortable. So subscribe to this channel, because these stories aren't just entertainment. They're reminders. And the next one might be the encouragement someone needs to finally say no, and choose themselves. What surprised me most wasn't how much my life changed, it was how many lives quietly intersected with my story afterward. Messages came in from people I'd never met, from different cities, different industries, all saying the same thing in different words: this happened to me too. Some had stayed silent. Some were still deciding. A few said they wished they'd had the courage sooner. I realized then that what I went through wasn't rare, it was just rarely spoken out loud. Power thrives in isolation, and silence is its favorite shield. Sharing my experience cracked that shield, even if only a little. I began mentoring younger professionals, not with grand speeches, but with honesty, telling them that ambition shouldn't require self-erasure. On certain nights, doubt still crept in. I'd wonder if my career trajectory would have been faster if I'd said nothing. But that thought never lasted long. Because every time I imagined the alternative version of myself, the one who stayed quiet, I felt a deeper loss than unemployment ever caused. If this chapter resonates with you, subscribe to the channel, because the final chapter isn't just an ending, it's a reminder of why stories like this matter. Looking back now, the message that once felt like a threat feels small, almost insignificant, compared to what it revealed. It exposed a truth we often avoid, that integrity doesn't announce itself loudly, and courage doesn't always look victorious in the moment. Sometimes it looks like being escorted out of a building you helped build, carrying a box of things that suddenly feel lighter than your conscience. I don't regret my reply. I regret the culture that made it risky in the first place. And if this story does anything, I hope it reminds you that your worth isn't determined by proximity to power, approval, or opportunity, it's defined by the lines you refuse to cross. Thank you for staying through every chapter, every rise and fall. Subscribe to this channel, because stories like this don't just end, they echo. And the next one might be exactly what someone needs to hear when they're standing at the edge of a decision that could change everything.